In just 12 minutes, let's learn how to integrate Particle's Smart Wallet as a Service on Linea. Linea was one of the first blockchains that we actually supported within our Smart Wallet as a Service, and for good reason. Linea is a really powerful ZK EVM rollup built for making scalable Ethereum applications that take advantage of Linea's really high performance, their deep integration within the EVM ecosystem, and of course the natural level of scalability that comes from a ZK rollup. Linea being backed and built by Consensys makes it a really good candidate for a strong Ethereum-aligned ZK rollup to be using within your own application. So this is why we support both Linea mainnet and Go Early natively within our Smart Wallet as a Service, so that you can build truly consumer-ready applications, taking advantage of social login leading to smart accounts, which then of course enable things like gasless transactions and batch transactions, session keys, and so on, all in an environment that enables consumer onboarding through that performance and that scalability. But how do you actually achieve this? How do you create a Web2 adjacent, consumer-ready application on Linea by leveraging Particle's Smart Wallet as a Service? This is of course a question that we aim to answer today, because in just 12 minutes, we're going to go through the process of creating a full demo application. This application will onboard a user to Linea through their social login, then assign them a smart account, and facilitate a completely gasless transaction. So let's jump right in. So basically today, our goal is to create an application that will onboard a user through their social account. Specifically, we want to confine this to either their Google account or their Twitter account. Now, once they onboard through this social login mechanism, we'll then need to go ahead and assign a smart account, in this case, an instance of simple account, to the EOA generated by the social login process. Then from there, we want to use that smart account to send a completely gasless transaction on Linea Go Early. So this will take about 80, maybe 90 lines of code. It's pretty simple, although of course the main goal here is to give you a better idea of what it looks like to integrate Particle's Smart Wallet as a Service within your own application. So for the sake of this demo, let's start with index.tsx. This is the file where we're basically going to configure Particle Network itself to be used within our application. So to get started here, let's begin by importing a few different base libraries. First, of course, will be React. We can also import React DOM. Then from Particle, we'll need to go ahead and import Linea Go Early. That'll be from @particle-network/chains. In addition to that, we can import authcore context provider from @particle-network/authcore modal. Then we can go and close this off by importing our main app component from ./app, or of course the equivalent within your own project. Okay, so now that we have these imported, let's move on to configuring Particle itself with an authcore context provider. So to do this, we'll first need to call React DOM, then do .create root. Within here, we can pass in document.get element by ID, then throw in root, and cast this to type HTML element that we can call .render and open it up here. To begin here, we can quickly open up a React.strict mode. And now within here, we can go ahead and use authcore context provider to, like I mentioned, configure Particle Network. So let's go ahead and write out authcore context provider and then define our options right here. Although before we continue, we'll basically need to start here by populating 3 required fields. This is the project ID, the client key, and the app ID. To retrieve these, we'll first head over to the Particle dashboard. So let's go ahead and do that and then come back. All right, so I'm here on the Particle dashboard. I'll go and click on add new project, throw in Linea demo, then click save. Now within here is the Particle dashboard. This is basically like the master control center for Particle's Wallet as a Service, alongside our AA infrastructure like our Paymaster, even our RPC infrastructure, IPFS, and so on. But for now, we want to stick within this applications menu so that we can retrieve those aforementioned values. We already have the project ID and the client key, so now we need the app ID. To retrieve that, let's first go ahead and create a web app. I'll name this again Linea demo. And now within this field, I'm going to throw in the domain in which I'm hosting this application. Although of course, if you haven't gotten to the stage where you've deployed this application just yet, and you're still running it on localhost, then feel free to throw in any filler domain here and it'll still work. So let's go ahead and click on OK, and here we go. I'm going to copy the project ID, the client key, and the app ID. Now I can go ahead and throw those into environment variables within my application and continue. To begin, I'll go ahead and define project ID as process.en.react app project ID. Then I'll do the same thing for client key along with app ID. So now with those defined, we can move on to our optional configurations. Let's begin by defining ERC437. That'll be an object. Basically, this will determine the type of smart account displayed on the wallet modal. So in this case, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing a simple account. So I'll set the name to simple and the version to 1.0.0. Then below this, I can set wallet to the subject here. This will control the wallet modal itself. So whether or not we want the wallet to pop up after login, this will present itself as basically a small little particle logo in the corner of the application. And then once you click that, that'll open up the wallet modal, but it's optional. Although in this case, I do want to set it to true. So I can go and set visible to true. And then because I'm setting that to true, I can define custom style and then throw in support chains as Linea Go Early. This will basically limit the wallet to only show Linea Go Early as the supported chain. Now we can go and wrap this up here by throwing in our app component right here. And there we go. We've pulled our project ID, client key, and app ID from the Particle dashboard, configured the smart account display, as well as the wallet modal itself. So now let's move on to app.tsx and actually build our main application here. All right, so similar to index, within our app.tsx file here, let's start by importing a few different libraries. We can begin with React, along with useState and useEffect. Additionally, we can import a few different hooks to use Particle's smart wall as a service. These will be use Ethereum, use Connect, and use authcore. That'll be imported from appparticle-network/authcore modal. Then, of course, same as last time, we can import Linea Go Early. Then on the account abstraction side, we need to use Particle's account abstraction SDK to, of course, set up the smart account, as well as set up our Ethers object. So for that, we'll need AA wrap provider and smart account. That'll come from appparticle-network/AA. Then, of course, we can import Ethers along with notification from anti. Then to close it off real quick, we can go ahead and import our CSS. Okay, so we're now ready to go ahead and create our main app component. So we can just go ahead and call this app and open it up here. Within app, we'll need to begin by defining the functions within our different hooks. This will first be provider from use Ethereum. This is just simply an EIP 1193 provider object that we'll be using within Ethers in a moment. We can also import connect and disconnect as use connect. And then finally, we can do user info as use authcore. Then in addition to these, I want to set one quick state, which will be balance, and set balance as use state. Now with all of these set, we're ready to go ahead and quickly configure the smart account that we'll be using itself. So basically we need to tie this to the Particle dashboard and tell the SDK what smart account implementation we actually want to use. Because Particle is quite modular in that it supports multiple different smart account implementations, all of which can be swapped in and out just based on one parameter. But in this case, we primarily support Linea within a simple account implementation. So thus we'll need to tell the SDK that we want to assign a simple account to the EOA generated by social login. So let's go ahead and do this within smart account. That'll be new smart account. Then we can pass in provider and open up an object here. Within here, similar to authcore context provider, we can begin by setting our project ID along with our client key and of course our app ID. Now specifically where we define the smart account that we want to use is within AA options. In here, we'll basically want to choose between simple, cyberconnect, or Biconomy to again tell the SDK what we want to use. In this case, I'll choose simple. I'll set the chain ID to Linea Go Early.id as well as the version to 1.0.0. Now I actually want to convert this smart account object into a custom Ethers provider so that I can send transactions, retrieve the balance, and so on as I would within a normal application. But in this case, I want to route that through a smart account and of course convert transactions to user operations. So to do this, I can just simply define custom provider and set that to new ethers.providers.web3 provider and then pass a new AA wrap provider, which will take smart account. Then we can also throw in any. Now, if we want to make the transactions that we send through this provider gasless, then we can also go ahead and import send transaction mode and then add send transaction mode.gasless to AA wrap provider. Because we're on Linea Go Early, a testnet at the moment, by setting this, we'll actually automatically sponsor all transactions sent from this provider without me needing to fund the paymaster or anything. Although if you're doing this on mainnet, you'll need to go back to the Particle dashboard, fund the paymaster, and of course set up some conditions for sponsorship. Okay, so now with all that set, let's move on to creating the first of three major components of the application. This first component is actually retrieving and displaying the balance on the front end. To begin doing this, we'll first need to go ahead and open up a use effect. And within this use effect, we can check the condition of user info, which in this case, we're just checking if user info is falsy or truthy. If it's falsy, then we don't need to update the balance because the user isn't signed in yet. Otherwise, if it's truthy, meaning user has logged in, then we can update the balance accordingly. So to update the balance, we'll want to call a function called fetchBalance, which we'll be defining in just one moment. Now we can quickly make this use effect dependent upon the status of user info. So now let's go ahead and write the fetchBalance function as fetchBalance. That'll be asynchronous. Now within here, we can basically do this within just 3 lines of code. Let's begin by retrieving the address of the smart account with await smart account.getAddress. Now we can pass this into a getBalance call through balance response and calling await custom provider.getBalance and then throwing in address. Now this will retrieve the balance of the smart account denominated in way. So then we can set the balance, but we want to convert this to an ether value. So we can throw in ethers.utils.formatEther and pass in balance response. All right, so now that we have fetch balance defined, let's move on to the second component of our application. This will be handle login. It'll be asynchronous and take one parameter called auth type. Now, essentially handle login is going to be the logic behind our social login buttons. So this will control the entire social login mechanism that I described earlier. And it'll actually be quite simple. We can again start by opening up a conditional that checks the status of user info, although this time we want to check if user info is not defined because we only want to handle social login if a user has not already logged in. So if a user isn't logged in and we call the handle login function, we can do await connect, then pass in social type as auth type. So dictating whether we want to do something like Google, Twitter, email, phone, GitHub, etc. Then the chain as Linea Go Early. And that's it. That's all the logic backing our social login mechanism. As you can see, it's pretty simple. So now let's move on to the final component of our application. This will be execute user op. And like I mentioned at the beginning, basically we want to send a sample transaction, which will be a burn of 0.001 ETH, and we want that transaction to be gas. So within execute user op, let's start by first retrieving the signer within a variable called signer, and we can do custom provider.getSigner. Then underneath here, let's construct our transaction object within TX, which will contain 2 key parameters. First, of course, will be 2, and I'm just using the standard dead address right here. Then we can also define value as ethers.utils.parseEther, then 0.001. So we're setting 0.001 ETH to that dead address right there, effectively burning it. So we can now send that transaction or that user operation within TX response, which we can just simply set to await signer.send transaction and then throw in TX. Now we also want to retrieve the transaction receipt so that we can know when the transaction was completed and what the transaction hash was. So we can set TX receipt to await TX response, await. Then we can use TX receipt within notification.success, in which we can set the message to TX receipt transaction hash. And that's it. At this point, we've defined our smart account, created a custom Ethers provider, fetched the user's balance, handled social login, and of course sent a sample user operation. So let's go ahead and wrap all this up within a return statement, which will contain all of our JSX. Although within these videos, I actually skipped a section because it can take a long time and be a little bit repetitive. So I'll go ahead and get this written and then come back. And here we are. We're displaying the logos of Particle and Linea, then checking the condition of user info. If user info is not defined or if it's falsy, meaning a user has not logged in, then we display sign in with Google and sign in with Twitter. Then once they are logged in, we display their name, their balance in ETH, as well as our 2 buttons, execute user op and log out. Log out is just very simply mapped to disconnect, which we defined up here. So let's go ahead and close all this off by just adding export, default, and then app. So we're ready to give this a try. Let's go ahead and run this and see if it works. Looks like it worked. We have our 2 buttons, sign in with Google and sign in with X or Twitter. So let's go ahead and give this a try by signing in with X. And I'll go ahead and click on authorize app. And here we go. We have my name, in this case, my Twitter name, my balance in ETH, which is 0.011, our 2 buttons, and of course the wallet modal right here. As you can see, the wallet modal itself has more information about my balance in ETH, can send, receive, check my tokens, NFTs, and so on. And of course, it's locked to Linea Go Early because we chose that during the configuration process. So let's go and give this a try with execute user operation. As you can see, we have the pop-up right here. I'll go ahead and click on confirm. And there we go. Looks like it went through. Let's go and copy this transaction hash and check it out on the Explorer. As you can see, the transaction was successful. And of course, it went through without me paying any gas fees. With Linea being a pretty long-standing supported chain of ours, we were super excited to extend Smart Wallet as a Service support directly to both Linea Go Early and Linea Mainnet. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about our tech stack, from our Smart Wallet as a Service to our Intent Fusion protocol and confidential ZK stack, then I'll have a full blog post detailing all of this linked below. Additionally, if you'd like to give the demo that we made today a try, or if you'd like to try our main web demo, then I'll also have both of those linked below.